Here we go. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. We have a lot to talk about today, so I say we get straight into it. So, today we are going to be covering the AFC South, and we're also going to the AFC South, and then we're also going to be covering the AFC West. So, very similar format to everything that we've done up to this point. So, first thing I want to do is I want to check in on some of the Reddit stuff from last week through this weekend. So, looking at what we've missed, last week I had a poll asking who was going to win the AFC North. Granted, results aren't final yet, but there's one vote, and you can see one vote for Cleveland. So it sounds like we're gonna be seeing another Cleveland. And again, I know this is only one voter, but we'll get there. I can only assume it's the same person voting for Nelson Aguilar when I asked who you would rather have on your team, assuming both were in their primes. And Nelson Aguilar appears to be the victor of that. So, let me switch back over to you guys. So, here's what we're going to do. My first question for everybody is, what is going to happen in Tennessee? Because I look at the Titans, and I have a really tough time seeing a contender. Even with the signing of DeAndre Hopkins, I have a very, very difficult time seeing Tennessee making a real push for the Super Bowl. And the reason why I say this is because I feel that Tennessee lives and dies on the success of Derrick Henry. Now, we're going to take a look at his statistics here, as my window capture decides to not work. So, we're going to take a look at Derrick Henry's stats here. So, in his early years, not the most production you'll ever see. Granted, he only started in 2 games, not getting a ton of touches. That's fine. We can get over that. 2018, he started a lot more games than he did before, so that's where you start seeing more numbers out of him. But still, not a ton of production there. And this was at the time when many thought that Derrick Henry's career was already over before it really had a chance to begin. 2019 rolls around, and you can see he breaks past that 1,500-yard mark. 2020, 2,000 yards. Now, the other thing I want to notice here, look at the touchdowns. 16, 17. For a guy who's getting a ton of yards, that's not that many. Not much of an improvement there. So, I feel like that's something I want to see more out of Derrick Henry. Is I want to see him getting more touchdowns. Rushing for 2,000 yards, I want to see 21 touchdowns on the board. Rushing for 1,500 yards, okay, yeah, I'll give him 16 touchdowns. I'll even give him 14, we'll say. But for a guy who is getting, his career average is 81 yards per game, but when you look at the numbers, 126 yards a game in 2020, and he's rushing for 2,000. He should easily be able to get past 20 touchdowns on the season. Now, I see 2021 only playing in 8 games. We'll get over that. He still hit 937 yards. Again, we'll get over that. But I still want to see more, even after 2022, only playing in 16 games. But, what the fuck? but only picking up 1,500 yards. Granted, he did the same in 2019, but he's shown he can get 2,000 yards. I'm not saying that's a career year for Derrick Henry. I feel like he still has a lot more to offer. But if Derrick Henry succeeds, then Tennessee is going to succeed. Now, I'm really being harsh on Derrick Henry here because looking at the past few years, that 2019 year that I had mentioned, 9-7, 11-5, 12-5, and then they only finished 7-10 in 2022. There's a lot more to the story than just Derrick Henry, but looking at their roster, yes, Ryan Tannehill stands out. Malik Willis, I'm not really sold on him. And then we're also going to briefly talk about Will Levis in a little bit. But I'm not sold on Malik Willis. I wasn't sold on him coming out of Auburn. Ryan Tannehill, we all know, was quarterback for Miami for a long time. But he really didn't do much in Miami. He wasn't their biggest problem per se, but they should have replaced him well before they did. Granted, I don't think they should have replaced him with Tua, but whatever. Now, when you look down at their wide receivers from last year, Josh Gordon stands out, but let's be honest, how good was Josh Gordon really? You know, we're not going to really focus on him today, but Josh Gordon, really not a difference maker. Wasn't a difference maker for the Browns. Really didn't do shit for the Patriots. And I don't remember hearing a word about him in Tennessee, so granted, only playing in 2 games last year, but not what you want to see out of a guy who has that type of recognition. Now, I understand that in 2021, Julio Jones did play in Tennessee, but he only played in 10 games, and he really didn't do too hot. Leaving Atlanta, this is what... Oh yeah, the highlights. Leaving Atlanta, this is the type of stuff that Tennessee was hoping they were getting. They really didn't get this out of him. Again, only playing in 10 games. What the hell? Thank you, sportsreference.com. Only playing in 10 games, 434 yards. That is pretty pathetic. And it gets worse when you look at his touchdowns. Granted, he's never been known to have the most touchdowns in the world, but only 1 touchdown in 10 games. If that is not pathetic for someone who's supposed to be one of the top receivers in the NFL, I don't know what is. So that's my take on the Tennessee Titans. We're going to go over what they did throughout this offseason. So, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, not really going to focus on him for right now because I want to see what he does. And we all know that D-Hop is arguably the best receiver in the league. I might do a separate video about him, but for right now, we're just going to leave that as is because what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about Will Levis. Surrounding the draft, there was the question of how did he not go in the first round? Now, looking at his stats here, we're not going to focus on 2019 and 2020, but 21 and 22, I think we can start to see why he didn't go in the first round. On top of the fact that his completion percentage not very good. But yeah, I'm not sold on him. I don't think he was all that impressive playing in Kentucky when you watch the game film. And really, the stats seem to back that up anyways. So, yeah. Looking back at the roster, Malik Willis, wasn't sold on him. Not sold on Will Levis. Not entirely sold on Ryan Tannehill, but he fits pretty well-ish in Tennessee. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. So we're going to move on to Indianapolis real quick. I'm going to briefly touch up on them because Indy had a really quiet offseason. So I don't really want to put a ton of time into them. So looking at what Indianapolis did, they lost in the offseason cornerback Stephon Gilmore. He is going to be playing in Dallas this year. Now, I'm not going to really talk about this because don't worry, Colts fans, I'm not going to torture you this week. We're going to torture the Cowboys when we get to them. Don't worry, that's next week. You're safe for now. In the offseason, though, they did gain Darrynton Evans, halfback, and then in the draft, they also picked up Anthony Richardson from Florida, Julius Brents from Kansas State, cornerback, and wide receiver Josh Downs from North Carolina. So, yeah, like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Indianapolis because they're still kind of in that in-between section of are they tanking or are they trying to get to 500? We don't really know, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them. Instead, we're going to jump straight down to Jacksonville. Jacksonville was able to pick up D'Ernest Johnson from the Browns. They also drafted Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, Brenton Strange out of Penn State, and Tank Bigsby out of Auburn. So we're going to focus on D'Ernest Johnson here. Let me get my thing going. So D'Ernest Johnson coming out of Cleveland. 2021 was the best year out of the four. He was definitely the running back behind Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Okay, we can get over that. But looking at 2021, there's some talent here. You know, I hate the fact that this is going to be a pseudo rookie year for Johnson in Jacksonville. But if Jacksonville can get this guy some touches, we might see him picking up 800-900 yards this year. Maybe even next year, depending on how they use him. Again, with him being in Cleveland behind Chubb and Kareem Hunt, he was never really going to be that breakout guy. Probably wasn't the best place for him to go anyway. But again, there's some talent here, and I think he can certainly be a starter for any team like Jacksonville. So, yeah, real quick take on Jacksonville there, which means we're going to jump straight down to Houston. So let's talk about Houston for a moment. Last year, Houston traded Deshaun Watson to the Cleveland Browns in a trade that is most likely going to rival Herschel Walker's trade. I don't want to get into that too much right now, but just keep that in mind for the future. Now, Houston, they had an up and down offseason. They lost Brandon Cooks to the Cowboys via trade this year. But the thing that I'm concerned about with the Cowboys is Brandon Cooks is going to be 30 years old. So, I don't have enough screens apparently. So looking at Brandon Cooks over the years, he's had some production. He's not necessarily elite production, but very solid production starting in New Orleans and then spending a year in New England, 2017. But then you're going to look down at 2020 and 21 in Houston, where he just started hitting that 10,000. Yeah, 10,000 yards. Greatest receiver ever. Shut up. He started hitting 1,000 yards again, even hitting 1,100 yards in 2020. So there is certainly talent here. Touchdowns, he's not getting a ton, but that's okay. He's a solid player. Not an elite player, but very solid player. I think Houston's going to end up winning this trade because I'm thinking at this point, Brandon Cooks, I feel like is becoming more of a journeyman. Not necessarily a washed-up journeyman yet, but I don't think he was ever going to be the guy no matter where he goes. And looking at how he's bounced around some teams here, did not want to do that necessarily, but anyways, looking at how he's bounced around on a number of teams throughout his career, I think it's safe to say he's a journeyman. Houston is trying to reset themselves anyway, so I feel like Dallas is taking on a burden, trying to get a lot of production out of Brandon Cooks. Now, Houston did a lot more than just trading away Brandon Cooks. In terms of what they brought in during this offseason, they were able to trade for Shaq Mason, an offensive guard from the Bucks. Dalton Schultz coming in from the Cowboys. They also picked up Devin Singletary from Buffalo. I didn't even realize he was still in the league because you really didn't hear about him at all. And I think this is why. So he did play most of, if not all, the season when he was in Buffalo. But what he doesn't have is the numbers. Now, sorting this by his yardage here, there's really not much to show me that he can be an elite running back. What the okay, well, that was weird. Anyway, Jesus. Alright, so it seems like we're going through some more trouble here. Anyways, as I was saying, he has not shown me that he can be an elite running back in the league, and I think this is why you don't hear much from him, because there's not much from him to show. So I feel like, again, this is another one of the pseudo-rookie years. I really don't like having these pseudo-rookie years being in the league, but this is where we're at. So I think for Devin Singletary, what I want to see out of him is I want to see him break through 1,000 yards. I also want to see him get 200 rushing attempts. It's going to be a little bit tougher being in Houston with them going on a full reset. But I think if Devin Singletary wants to prove himself that he can be a great starter in the league, 1,000 yards and 200 rushing attempts, I think is very, very viable. In terms of touchdowns, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to give him 10 touchdowns. You know, I think that's very fair to say, considering he's hit 7 in 2021. But if he's going to pick up 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns should be reasonable. The last thing I want to talk about with Houston is their drafting this year. So in the first round, they were able to pick up Will Anderson out of Bama. They also picked up Juice Scruggs out of Penn State. But the big one is CJ Stroud, as you can see here, coming out of Ohio State. And this is coming from a Bucks fan. I should stress, Ohio State fan. I don't think CJ Stroud is anywhere close to NFL ready. And yes, I'm looking at the same thing you are. 4,400 yards, 3,600 yards. But when you think about the teams that he's had to play in the Big Ten, and really in college in general, especially the Big Ten, he played against some very, very soft schools. And in the games against Michigan, oh my God, he was frustrating to watch. Especially once we get to the college football playoffs. CJ Stroud, I think, single-handedly lost the Bucs the national championship against Bama. I don't think CJ Stroud is able to handle the pressure. And when you watch the games, you can see that it looked like he didn't have the confidence to do what needed to be done. He couldn't make the throws, couldn't throw accurately. There were times where it looked like he was trying to throw it to the defense. But yeah, I'm not sure that CJ Stroud is ready for the NFL. I think he should have stayed for his senior year, maybe develop more. This certainly reflects on Ryan Day being at Ohio State, because a lot of people leave early under him, but that's a different discussion for a different day. So that's a quick recap of the AFC South. I'm going to take a quick break real quick because I got to fix some stuff behind the scenes here. But when we come back, we're going to go over the AFC West. And this is where the stream is really going to start to pick up. I know I was rapid fire through the AFC South, but it's a very quiet division nowadays. And dare I say, Jacksonville's the only competition that Tennessee has to face, which even then doesn't say a lot. So we're going to be right back in a little bit, guys. Like I said, once we come back, we're going to talk about the AFC West. All right, let's get going. All right, sorry about that, guys. Anyways, so now that we've gone over the AFC South, I want to know who, as you see, massive typo. Who do you think's going to win the division? Houston, Tennessee, Indy, or Jacksonville? I'm going to say Tennessee, but I want to know what the people think. So, the AFC West. I feel like everyone's just going to directly point to the Denver Broncos. But you also have to think about there's a lot of stories coming out of there with the Jimmy Garoppolo signing, Kansas City winning another Super Bowl, and then the Chargers are just there. So let us start off with the Denver Broncos. They were able to convince Sean Payton to come out of retirement and be their head coach. Sean Payton, obviously, being the head coach of New Orleans for, 15 years? Bringing them a Super Bowl in 2009. But the big question, though, is will Sean Payton be the answer in Denver? No. And I mean no. Sean Payton is not going to be the answer in Denver. And here's why. Not only did he not coach last year, but he also only has that one Super Bowl win in 2009. He's come close, but in recent memory, no. Now, to be fair, New Orleans did get screwed against the Los Angeles Rams in 2019, but I don't think it's enough for us to look at and say Sean Payton's going to be the guy who's going to fix Russell Wilson. He's going to bring the offense back to life. This is going to be the team to beat in the AFC. It's not. You also have to think about that there were 3 straight years that Payton was in New Orleans that he only finished 7-9. Now, that's 3 years out of 15 where he had winning records otherwise. But I don't think that you can look at Sean Payton and say he's going to be the guy to bring a championship back to Denver. Russell Wilson is not Drew Brees, never was, never will be. He sure shit isn't Peyton Manning, who is the last quarterback to bring a Super Bowl to Denver. But yeah, that's, I don't know. I don't think Sean Payton's going to be the guy in New Orleans. Now, let's talk about Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, who I briefly went over in my AFC North coverage. What the hell is my computer doing? I briefly went over Russell Wilson in my AFC North coverage. Now, when we talked about Russell Wilson last, we were talking about from 2012 to about 2015, 2016. All right, yeah. So here's what we're going to do. No more face cam. Face cam's done for the day. But today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about Russell Wilson from 2019 through last season in Denver. When you look at the numbers here, some things stick out. The last 3 years in Seattle, 4,000 yards, 4,000 yards, 3,000 yards, that's okay, 3,500 yards. So statistically, he looks like he's getting a lot of things done. But when you look at the touchdowns, 31, 40, dropping 25, that's a big drop, mind you. Going down to 16. There was a point in time where Russell Wilson, like, how many weeks was this? This was deep into the season, and he had more bathrooms in his house than fucking touchdowns in the NFL. I don't know how that doesn't scream failure. And then going 4-11 as a quarterback. Granted, 6-8 in Seattle, but he was going down anyways. 4-11 when he's throwing for 3,500 yards. I don't know how you can look at Russell Wilson today and say, this is a quarterback that I want on my team. On top of the fact, he threw 11 interceptions. And that's always been an issue to me with Russell Wilson. Is after like 2018, I'll say, whenever I watched a Russell Wilson game, it looks depressing. There was a play where he was trying to throw the ball out to avoid a sack, and it got picked off and returned, I think, for a pick six. That was funny as fuck when that happened. But the other thing with Russell Wilson, though, look at his rushing numbers. His rushing numbers when he entered the league, these were hot rushing numbers because this was the time when the league was adapting to a college style of offense. He did develop as a passer, but he lost his skill as a runner. This is about the point in time where I think Russell Wilson really started to fall off. So no, Denver, I don't think this is going to be your year. You might improve to 5-11, but you are not anywhere close to a wild card spot. Don't tell me you are. You have a lot more to do before you even come close to that. Anyways, in terms of the draft, they picked up Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma, Drew Sanders out of Arkansas, and Riley Moss out of Iowa. This is going to bring us into Kansas City. Not going to spend a ton of time on them because I just don't have a lot of notes on them. Very quiet offseason after winning a Super Bowl. They did pick up Jawan Taylor from the Jaguars, so that should put a lot of pressure on this offensive line to be better because their offensive line hasn't really been that great. And watching Mahomes run all over the field like some guys playing Madden, it's stupid to watch. To be fair, Mahomes has one of the best arms the league has ever seen, but I don't think Mahomes is the best quarterback the NFL has seen in a while. We'll get to that at a different time. But in the draft, they picked up Felix Anadike Zuma, really odd last name, out of Kansas State, Rashee Rice out of SMU, and another weird name, Wyna Morris out of Oklahoma. So, yeah, quick recap for Kansas City. Las Vegas Raiders. Recently, Henry Ruggs was sentenced for, or was he sentenced? I'm pretty sure he was sentenced for his DUI in 2020 or 21. And he's looking at about 3 to 10 years. Fastest player in the NFL, if you know what I mean. But what I want to focus on, how much are the Raiders actually going to miss him? Because when you look at his production from his 2 years in the league, granted, he only played half the season in 2021. Didn't play in 2022 because he was in jail. But I don't see elite production here. And this is a guy that was drafted 12th overall. So to play in 12 games in your rookie year and only get not even 500 yards, that's a little sad. Again, 12th overall pick. He should easily be pushing 800 yards, maybe 850. But then to only play in 7 games and really drop to, well, not drop, but to only get 470. I don't know how much the Raiders are actually going to miss him because there really isn't much here to show me that he has elite potential. Now, we're not really going to focus on Henry Ruggs because that's not what I want this channel to be about. We're going to instead focus on what the Raiders brought in during the offseason. From free agency, this is where things get fun. DeAndre Carter from the Chargers. Austin Hooper, who, since leaving Atlanta, hasn't had the greatest of times. He's just kind of been there. I think he's moving towards journeyman status. But Austin Hooper, big name. And then obviously, the one that everybody's talking about, Jimmy Jesus. He is now free from San Francisco. Is expected to be the difference maker in Vegas that Derek Carr never was. And I'll show you in a few weeks. I'm not the biggest Derek Carr fan. But I'm sure some of you may be expecting me to pull up a screen dedicated to Jimmy G. I'm not going to do that. And instead, I'm going to leave you guys hanging here because there's another signing from Las Vegas that I want to have some extended time to talk about. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet, though. But we're going to come back to this. In the draft, they picked up Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, Brian Young out of Bama, and Trey Tucker out of Cincinnati. Finally, we are now at the Los Angeles Chargers. The big question surrounding them this year, is this the Justin Herbert year? I am going to say maybe. Here's why. Looking at his yardage, yes, he does have an arm. I would even go as far as saying he's a better passer than Patrick Mahomes. I know that says a lot, but he's able to get it to more people than Mahomes is, and he doesn't have the biggest names of talent that Kansas City has. Kansas City. Los Angeles does have some receivers, though. Very good wide receivers. Elite wide receivers, mind you. But the problem with me being convinced that this is the Justin Herbert year is he's not the most accurate quarterback you've ever seen. Granted, 66, 65, 68. These are very average numbers for a quarterback, but when you watch the games, even when he was coming out of college, accuracy seems to be an issue. You never know if the ball is going to his receiver. You never know if it's going to hit the ground. We don't know. I think there's still a lot to be seen with Herbert, but if he can be accurate this year, I'm going to say 72% completions. If he can hit that, we may very well be looking at the Justin Herbert year. And the Chiefs might actually have some competition going up against the Chargers. Can their kickers get the job done, though? Probably not. In the draft, Quentin Johnson, TCU. Their linebacker, Tuli Tipalutu out of USC. And then Dayan Henley out of Washington State. I apologize for being bad with names. So that's our quick recap of the AFC South and AFC West. Again, Raiders, I'm going to circle back to you because I got something in the works just for you guys. That's all I got for you all today. Next week when we come back, we're going to really get into the NFC. We're going to start with the NFC East, and then we're going to take on the NFC North afterwards. So that's all I got for you today. My final question, actually, before I forget to do this again. My final question to you all. Who is going to win the AFC West? As I can't find my Reddit now. There you are. Who's going to win the AFC West? Denver, Kansas City, Las Vegas, or the Chargers? Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, this has been the Stafford Sports Show, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good one, y'all.